Well, hi everyone, and welcome to the Legal Lunch Byte. It's good to be back after an absence of a few months, but Jonathan Bench has been holding down the fort without any problems. But anyway, I'm delighted to be back, and especially to be having this conversation with Christine Concepcion, our guest for today. Christine, welcome.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here.
So let's start where we always start, which is by asking you to introduce yourself. Tell us the basics about you, and maybe a few other things that you'd like everyone to know about you.
Sure. So, as you said, I am Christine Concepcion. I am a Florida attorney based in Miami, and also I have an office in Madrid. So, I split my time between Miami and Madrid. And I'm an international tax attorney. So, I represent clients that are coming into the United States, either temporarily, permanently, or want to invest in the US and need some tax planning advice. And I also represent clients, U.S. citizens that have assets abroad and need to make sure that they're reporting it correctly, or they might not have been reporting it at all. So we need to enter them into some sort of compliance program. But I'm a born and raised Miami girl, and I left for school. I was gone for about 10 years, and I started my career at Deloitte. Then I did a few years in big law. Very grateful for for those experiences. And about 3 years ago, I started my own firm, and it's been definitely an interesting process and time in my life, and I absolutely love it. I love having my own firm.
I can I can understand. There was a time when I was on my own, and there were obviously peaks and valleys when it came to that, but overall, I really enjoyed it. Not to say that so I'm also very happy at Harris Slowoski, but I do want to. I also lived overseas for a long time, and what you're saying really resonates, and I do want to go back to that. But before we do that, I'm also in Florida. I'm in Tallahassee, so
Great.
the opposite end of the state. But let's talk a little bit about Miami, if you don't mind. I mean, I feel that Miami, to one degree or another, has been a happening place for quite some time. But I do think that there has been this sort of extra burst of interest in Miami in the past few years. I think a lot of it had to do with, or has had to do with, the pandemic and people being able to go to wherever, to have the freedom to work remotely. I think there's also been a little bit of a certain sense that Florida is a place where it's easier to set up a business, less regulation, and I think there's some truth to that. But I want to get your perspective as someone from Miami, as someone who's there. What's the vibe there at the moment? What do you see happening? And kind of tying this to where the conversation will go later. For someone who is, let's say, looking at investing in the United States, why should they, or why shouldn't they look at Miami as a place for investing?
Thank you. So Miami has been really bubbling since the pandemic. We've always had an influx of foreign nationals, which in recent times started. Let's just start with in the 2000s, where we had a lot of Brazilians and Venezuelans arrive here, and that continued. And you really did see the market change when the Brazilians and the Venezuelans and some other countries started to get to Miami, and then it a little bit plateaued. Then the pandemic really shifted the immigration that we saw, and now we saw internal immigration, individuals from other states moving into Miami, and it continues to buzz. You could see it with our skyrocketing real estate prices. You could see it with skyrocketing rents, which thankfully have balanced out and actually are decreasing. Uh, but for someone that wants to come to the United States and invest, Miami has always been a great hub for investing in real estate. There's a lot of EB5 projects that you could find. You can invest a certain amount of money into one of these projects, and you get a visa, which then after a few years can convert into potentially a green card, so an immigration visa. And so there's a lot of great projects, and there's a lot of movement here in Miami. But what you really do see is a lot of real estate investment, and a lot of Latin Americans and some Europeans park their money in the United States, and they choose Miami, frankly, because they really do like the blue skies and the palm trees. And so that really feeds into my business, because there's a lot of foreign investment in U.S. real estate, which triggers a lot of different tax laws. And there needs to be a lot of structuring and some cleanup work if it isn't done correctly from the get-go. But Miami is definitely a great place to come, invest, enjoy, and yeah, it's a great place to be a tax attorney.
Yeah, I would think so. Especially right when you have that international focus, and you're absolutely right. It's important to get things right. Unfortunately, for some of our clients who were not our clients, and when they got into trouble, but we sometimes deal with foreign investors who didn't get their ducks in a row early enough, and then the cleanup can be a real issue. I do want, and maybe this will be a bit of a PSA for Americans living overseas. So I spent a lot of time living overseas, but when I first went abroad, I was working for the U.S. government, so obviously, that I had to. My tax obligations were the same, when I was in Washington, D.C. as when I was overseas. And plus, federal income tax is a required course, at my law school, or at least it used to be back then. So I knew that even after I left government service, I'd have to file my taxes. But I was surprised when I started talking to many of the other Americans living overseas at how uninformed they were. And I think part of the problem was that the expat communities had people from other countries, the Brits and the Australians, who have their own rules. And I think many Americans figured it's the same for them. So, and I know at least one person who had to go through the very painful process of cleaning things up. So maybe why don't you perhaps offer a summary of what an American citizen living overseas needs to be aware of when it comes to their tax obligations?
Sure. So as a U.S. citizen, and even green card holders living abroad, very important fact, you are still subject to worldwide income taxation and reporting. So just because you live in Dubai, live in any country, you could live on the moon, and you're still going to be required to report your worldwide tax and report your worldwide assets. So that means that if you're working abroad for a foreign company and you have a pension plan, well, guess what? You need to report that pension plan. And if you have foreign bank accounts, you need to report those foreign bank accounts also, provided that the aggregate is over $10,000. It's quite a low bar. And if you have certain types of foreign life insurances with a cash value, believe it or not, that has to be reported also. If you are living abroad and you've established your business abroad, well, guess what? You also have to report your interest in foreign companies. And the extent to which you're going to be paying taxes, or the amount of reporting that you're going to have to do, is going to depend on the level of interest that you have, on the type of asset abroad. And so what I see a lot in practice is that oftentimes the expats might go to a local accountant, but someone that doesn't really know the international tax reporting rules, and then they get themselves in really big trouble. I have a handful of clients right now that decided, U.S. citizens that decided to move abroad and either teach or start a business abroad, and they just thought that they were supposed to be reporting their foreign income at best. They never thought about reporting any other foreign assets. And some of them didn't even think that they had to report their taxes to the IRS. So they had been reporting only to the local jurisdiction. And now we're involved in these complex tax amnesty programs that, on one hand, we want to prove that they're non-willful, so that they're not subject to these incredibly high penalties. But sometimes the facts really just don't align. And you wonder, is this person really non-willful? And so then if they're non-willful, then we might have to enter them into another program, and the penalties there are quite high. And that's just for, taxpayers that aren't making too much money. But then when the taxpayer is making a lot of money or has very high net worth, and they're not fully reporting their foreign assets, then that's really when we can get in a sticky situation. And the IRS looks at how sophisticated the taxpayer is. So the more sophisticated you are, the higher chance that they might not accept your non-willful statement. So if you are a U.S. lawyer living abroad, you're in big trouble if you're not reporting your taxes correctly. There might be an argument that this lawyer didn't have the experience of tax, that maybe they were dedicated to only pro bono matters, but still, you don't want to have to make that argument. But really, the advice is, if you're moving abroad or living abroad or have assets abroad and still living in the U.S., you really need to find a proper tax preparer who is well versed in the international tax rules, because they could save you a lot of money from paying people like me to do a lot of cleanup work. And alternatively, hire an international tax attorney to help guide you with what needs to be reported, and if there's any planning optimization that we could do.
And you bring up a good point, which is you have to think ahead, and it might seem like an inconvenience to do X or Y. You're overseas, you figure what are the chances, right? But and maybe at this point, that bank account doesn't have a lot of money, but you never know. You could be a victim of your own success. I mean, I know that I certainly felt, when I started filing my FBARs, I felt like this is ridiculous, but I'm glad that I got into the habit of doing it. And now, you'll appreciate this. I love being married, but being married all of a sudden meant that I had to file, because I had a very, my own reporting was very limited. And then all of a sudden my wife comes in, and I remember the first time that we went over this, I'm like, why do you have all these accounts? Everything was, well, it's this one, it's because of this, and this one, you see, I get this. It made perfect sense from the point of view of a resident in X country. But looking at it from the point of view of a U.S. taxpayer, I'm like, this is not good. This means so I have to file these very, very long FBARs. But to your point, be careful, and be, if you're not current with your obligations, get current ASAP. So this leads to a question. When exactly should people reach out to an attorney like you? I mean, should they? Clearly, some people are thinking, well, I shouldn't wait until I get in trouble to that wouldn't be prudent. So when would be a good time for, let's say, an American expat to reach out and establish contact with you?
So when an expat, when a U.S. citizen or green card holder is going to or intends to move abroad, that would be a good idea to start reaching out to an international tax attorney, because they really should know what are going to be my tax filing requirements when I move over. And maybe it's not just your tax return. What if that expat is going to start a business abroad while they're moving abroad? Well, you know what? That really needs to have some tax planning, because the last thing that we want for this U.S. citizen or green card holder to do is to form a structure that is not very flexible, that is going to cause adverse tax consequences in the U.S. And so even it's necessary to hire a tax attorney before the move and before a U.S. citizen or green card holder forms any sort of entity abroad or invests any money abroad. And the flip side to that is, when is it a good time for a non-US citizen to hire a US tax attorney? And there's several times that it's relevant. First, if they plan on moving to the United States, there's a lot of pre-immigration tax planning that we could do that could reduce your overall estate tax burden. And we could do also some income tax planning. And then also, when a foreigner, they might not want to move to the US, but they might have some kids or grandkids who are going to become US citizens or green card holders, just by virtue of, maybe they came to study in the US and they said, you know what, I love it here, I'm going to stay. Well, that person should be thinking about succession planning. And if they want to leave assets to their children and grandchildren that might end up becoming US citizens or already are, that's another time for them to come see us. And finally, a third time a non-US citizen, non-green card holder should meet with us is if they're going to invest in the United States and not move. I see in Miami all the time non-residents signing the contract for the purchase of US real estate. They'll close on the property, and they never thought about what are the US tax consequences, income and estate tax, of purchasing real estate in the United States. And like I said earlier, the amount of taxes that we can mitigate by property structuring this investment, it's a lot. And if they even sign the contract for the purchase of real estate, then we're already in this tricky set of rules that we could easily avoid by having a structure first and then signing the contract once the structure is done. So before any foreigner buys real estate in the United States, please talk to an international tax attorney, not just a corporate attorney, not your title attorney. They won't be able to help structure this, but it's an international tax attorney that can help structure an investment in real estate.
And to that point, I've been surprised. I mean, I've seen foreign nationals investing, buying expensive properties in the U.S. and not giving a second thought to any of the legal consequences, right? I mean, you can, they might not even, if they can avoid it, they won't even get an attorney to help with, a real estate attorney, let alone an attorney to look at the other aspects of it. So, well, I think this was quite a good PSA. I mean, I think there was advice there for American citizens considering or already living overseas, also for foreign nationals that may have exposure to the U.S. and its tax laws for a variety of reasons. So we're at time. These conversations do go fast. We weren't kidding. But Christina, I want to thank you for taking the time to chat today, and to our listeners, you heard what Christina had to say. So if you are part of those demographics that could benefit from the advice that she offers, you know what to do next. So Christine, thank you so much, and hope we can chat again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, everyone.